When missiles light up the night sky over Iran, the shockwaves aren't just felt in military bunkers or political capitals. They are felt in the boardrooms of Paris Saint-Germain, the offices of FIFA, and the pristine stadiums of Doha. Today, we uncover how escalating military strikes in the Middle East are quietly dismantling the most expensive sports empire in human history, Qatar's football dominance. For over a decade, the state of Qatar has spent hundreds of billions of dollars on a singular geopolitical strategy: soft power through sports. By hosting the 2022 FIFA World Cup, buying European superclubs like PSG, and splashing the name Qatar Airways across the jerseys of the world's most famous teams, Qatar built an invisible shield. They wanted the world to view them not as a vulnerable peninsula in a volatile region, but as the safe, luxurious capital of global sports. But geography is destiny. The recent military strikes on Iranian soil have ignited a geopolitical powder keg. And as airspace closes, investments tremble, and regional security evaporates. Qatar's grand sporting illusion is facing its ultimate stress test, not to understand how a military strike on Iran affects a football match in Europe or a tournament in the Gulf. We must first look at the sky. Following the attacks targeting Iranian infrastructure, the immediate casualty wasn't just military equipment, it was commercial logistics. Almost instantly, global aviation authorities issued strict no-fly zones. This brings us to Qatar Airways. The state-owned airline is the lifeblood of Qatar's sports washing strategy. It is the official sponsor of FIFA, the Champions League, and numerous top-tier clubs. But Qatar Airways relies heavily on Iranian airspace to connect Europe to Asia. With that airspace becoming a potential war zone, flight times are extended, fuel costs skyrocket, and the logistical network that funds these massive sports sponsorships bleeds money. Qatar built the Hamad International Airport to be the world's transit hub. They sponsored football clubs to advertise this very hub. But if the region is perceived as a war zone, global tourists and football fans bypass Doha entirely. The strikes on Iran essentially trap Qatar in a geographical chokehold. The more unstable Iran becomes, the more isolated Qatar's multi-billion-dollar infrastructure becomes from the Western world. Before we dive into how this impacts mega clubs like PSG, let me ask you, do you think sports and geopolitics should be kept separate, or is it impossible in the modern world? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Canal Viral for more deep dives into global events. Beyond logistics, there is the issue of physical security and reputation. For years, Qatar has positioned itself as the Switzerland of the Middle East, a neutral, safe ground where enemies can negotiate and where the world's best athletes can train safely. European giants routinely travel to Doha for winter training camps. It's highly lucrative for Qatar's local economy and brilliant for their global image. But look at the map. Doha is separated from the Iranian coast by a narrow stretch of the Persian Gulf. As strikes hit Iran, the threat of retaliation, stray missiles, or naval blockades in the Strait of Hormuz becomes a statistical probability. Will a European football club, valued at over $1 billion, risk sending its star players to a training camp mere miles from an active conflict zone? The answer is no. Insurance premiums for traveling to the region are spiking. If the illusion of safety shatters, Qatar's heavily funded Aspire Academy and its world-class sports medical centers will sit empty. The world is worried because an escalation doesn't just disrupt the local economy, it threatens the entire calendar of international sports that relies on Gulf nations for funding, hosting, and transit. Now, let's look at the crown jewel of Qatari soft power, Paris Saint-Germain. Qatar Sports Investments, or QSI, is a subsidiary of the state's sovereign wealth fund. Their endless supply of money comes from liquid natural gas exports. And where do those exports travel? Through the Strait of Hormuz. If an attack on Iran leads to Tehran attempting to close the Strait of Hormuz, Qatar's primary source of wealth is immediately bottlenecked. While the Qatari state has massive reserves, a prolonged disruption forces the government to reevaluate its spending. Funding the European football club's astronomical wage bill becomes difficult to justify to domestic citizens when the nation is facing a severe regional security and export crisis. Furthermore, European leagues are heavily scrutinized by financial fair play regulators. If Qatar Airways, Bein Sports, or Qatar National Bank have to reduce their sponsorship deals due to regional economic downturns caused by war, clubs like PSG, or even leagues that rely on Bein's broadcasting rights, will face massive financial deficits. The dominoes start in Tehran, but they fall in Paris, London, and Madrid. Geopolitical analysts agree that the era of risk-free sports washing is over. Dr. Simon Chadwick, a prominent professor of Eurasian sport, has often highlighted that the Gulf states' heavy investments in sports are highly sensitive to geopolitical shocks. Experts note that while Qatar has successfully navigated blockades in the past, an active, kinetic war involving Iran brings unprecedented risks. The global consequence is a potential pivot. If Qatar is deemed too close to the blast zone, the center of gravity for sports investment might shift. Western clubs might distance themselves from Gulf sponsorships to avoid PR disasters. Alternatively, we might see a shift toward North America, which is gearing up for the 2026 World Cup and offers geopolitical stability. The reality is, modern football is not just a game. It is an asset class, and capital hates instability. The strikes on Iran serve as a violent reminder that stadiums built on shifting sands, no matter how beautiful, can crack when the geopolitical ground shakes. Qatar spent $300 billion to buy a seat at the global table, using football as its universal language. They built a fortress of soft power, hoping it would make them untouchable. But as missiles fly over Iran and the Middle East braces for the unknown, Qatar is learning a very expensive lesson. You can buy the world's greatest football clubs. You can host the world's biggest tournaments. But you cannot buy geography. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep your eyes on the news and look beyond the headlines.